I would like to invite the panelists for the panel that's following. Lennert will stay. So Maurice, Jenkins. Oh, sorry. I shouldn't do that, right? I told you guys to not do this, and I'm doing it. Maurice Jenkins, Mulrooney, Duncan Hawkins, and Mihai Tica. Yes, please. Join us on stage. Yes, a great round of applause for our new panelists.
What's up, baby? How you feeling? You been all right?
Yeah.
Good. Hey, how are you? Where do you want me, boss?
Wherever you want. So, very happy to have this panel. And we're going to talk about frictionless travel, frictionless passenger facilitation, which has been a topic for more than 10 years, and it's a lot of development, a lot is happening. We see biometrics being used, we see digital identity coming up, but often it's still a broken up process with a bit of biometric here, then a queue, and then a bit of biometric there. But the passengers are more and more getting used to this. So we have a lot to discuss. But first, a round of introductions. And I would like to ask Mihai to start.
Hi. Hi, everyone. I like the intimate, so we can actually have pretty much all of us a conversation. CIO from Dusseldorf, thank you for having me. And yeah, interesting topic for today, for sure.
Maurice?
Good afternoon, everyone. Maurice Jenkins, Chief Innovation Officer and CX for Miami International Airport. It's a pleasure to be here and good to have the opportunity to engage with everyone again. By the way, if you don't ask questions, I will pick on you. So that's always, it's a preamble for this event. So just want to let you know that ahead of time. Be prepared.
Yes.
Maurice, yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Duncan Hawkins from Ericsson, responsible for our private networks organization across EMEA. That does mean I travel through airports a lot. Got a good perspective, and I guess I'm maybe the odd one out a little bit on the panel here. We've got 4 great airports, and I'm coming from the perspective today in terms of like how connectivity is central to the AI that Lennert just talked about, the automation of an airport, and it's all about that coverage, capacity, and performance in like a secure and agile way. So keen to support these guys and help understand how connectivity is quite key to that passenger journey.
I hope this is on. You can hear me?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm Mulrooney, and I'm the CTO and VP of Innovation for the Edmonton International Airport. And if members here don't know where that is, KLM does have a direct flight to us, by the way, and I'm from Canada. So I'm going to provide the Canadian context today.
Good.
Yeah, I'm Lennert. I'm the CIO of Amsterdam Airport Schiphol.
Yes. So, frictionless travel, seamless travel, walking pace experience. Like I just said in the introduction, we experience it more and more, but it's mostly broken up. So, from the passenger perspective, do you think this is now an expectation, or is it a luxury that they should be happy to have? Who wants to kick off?
I'm the troublemaker in the group, so why not? I think we've gotten to a point, and I think I was having a conversation earlier with some other individuals. We're sitting here in 2024 right now, right? So we're looking at, there's a level of expectation for the traveling public and our industry that's moving 4 billion people a year globally. There's a level of expectation to have the ability to not have to use this to show you my boarding pass, pull out my passport, all of these things. And earlier today, my hands was full. I didn't have an opportunity to hold a coffee in my hand because I'm carrying 2 mobile devices and everything else. So there's an expectation. I want contactless, seamless movement as I go through a facility because I want that level of comfort and feel. Because as Lennert mentioned earlier, we need to look at our level of spend. We're looking at passenger satisfaction to actually spend money and enjoy the experience that an airport creates. And I think it's the foundational framework. If we're going to be transformative and we need to move into a new dynamic, we're long overdue to getting there. And the thing is, how do you go about doing that, one, and then getting the level of adoption and buy-in to create the continuity to continue? And I think that's one of the fundamental concerns that we should consider as well.
Yeah.
So maybe if I pick up on that, right? It's about definitely face recognition. For me, somebody doesn't look like Brad Pitt. I'm really looking to use my face as an asset at some point. But I think it's not just face recognition. It really goes against the full travel experience, exactly in the full industry, right? It goes into being able to use in-flight as well, completely touchless, and be able to use that same biometry in the hotel and throughout the entire journey.
Yeah, I see Tara nodding as well.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to actually talk about it in two different perspectives, perhaps. Canadians are really, we value our privacy. And so we want to make sure that the information that we provide to our government or to airlines is secure. But when we talk about that predictive, seamless experience, it's more than biometrics, right? It's with these airports now, there's dynamic changes every day, a lot of construction going on. I think we also want to know how to traverse, what to expect, right? How long are those queues? So I think it's a combination of biometrics and information that I can use to actually anticipate where I'm going in the airport and how long it will take me to get there, and where can I shop and pick up my coffee,
Yeah.
right? So I do think it's a combination.
Yeah. So it's an expectation and a wish in a way, you say. It's more of a, yeah. It's really, and therefore an expectation that they hope is there. Yeah.
But I think it should be a norm, not a perk.
Yeah.
You know, you're looking at it from the expectation of frictionless travel, biometrics. It's a perk. It's not really a perk. It's a level of expectation. It's the norm. It's the way you do business today. And I go back and look, those of you recall when the ATM came out and people had ATM cards, but still went into a bank and stood in a very long line to get cash, but they didn't want to go. It's an adoption. How do we educate to the point and realize that we need to effectuate change? And we as an airport have a different mindset of how we want to engage our customer to have that level of comfort and feel compared to an airline. But the synergy needs to be airport, airline, full travel ecosystem.
Yes, it is always an ecosystem, indeed. Did you want to comment?
Yeah, I
Duncan?
think Lennert touched on that sort of familiarity and that choice of what airport you go to. So those airports that maybe have the luxury of having a better experience, you know, they're going to keep their customer. We all have our preference on which airports we go through, and we have good and bad experiences. But I also think we've barely scratched the surface. Even those ones that are, they've got the luxury. There's so much more we can be doing, and it comes in. We're going to, I guess, talk about many things: data sharing of information, the role of the airline in the airport. The art of the possible is incredible. So that, you know, there's sort of a standard that's set by some airports today, but we can go so much further, and that's by, you know, connecting so many more things in the airport to give the real-time information on the gate, like we mentioned, or, you know, and then be agile and start to move things around to deal with peak times and flows, because we've all got that feeling in an airport whereby when things are going wrong, a bad weather situation, there's actually a sort of bad vibe in the airport, right? Everyone's struggling to get information, and people herd in areas, and so to actually make the airport environment good at all times, because the information is better for the passenger to go to the right place and move. So there's so much scope to do so many cool things. And some airports are doing a really good job already, but yeah, there's a lot more that we can do.
Exactly. So it's a necessity. And I think what's important to stress is not just a necessity from the passenger experience, but also from security. Because if you have secure identity management, it serves both ways. It serves the flow, and it serves for security. But we are not there yet, right? We have, what do we need?
Yeah, in all honesty, I don't envy our government, because I think it's quite a balancing act they need to fill in. And in the same time, I'm also a simple consumer, and I can pay 50K with only my face, but I'm not able to trespass a door in an airport to get to somewhere else. And I think it's exactly what Maurice is saying. It's also the expectation that things are easy and swift and following our expectations. But then building trust between countries with different levels of privacy, with different modeling in the airports. Some of them are commercial, some of them are state-owned. It becomes quite a difficult problem with a lot of variables, and I think that's what helps is, for instance, the DTC pilot, which we did with our colleagues in Canada, because we have a similar level of privacy. I think that really helps, but I think in this case, technology is not our enemy. That's been taken care of. I think it's how do we create enough trust between countries and creating a same level of understanding what does good look like. and I think we're nowhere near, in all honesty.
Okay, and I see Tara nodding her head.
Yeah.
And Canada was referred with the ICAO DTC pilot with KLM flying from Canada to the Netherlands.
Correct, yes. Yeah, and I think, well, we have a great relationship, Canada and Schiphol and KLM. However, in Canada, our federal government hasn't actually established that federal ID. And so the US has done a great job where they have a federal ID, and then any airline, any airport can feed into that to create that seamless experience. Right now, who is pioneering in Canada is an airline, Air Canada. I don't know if they're here at the event, but they've done some really innovative trials of biometric processing at Vancouver Airport and at the Toronto Pearson Lounge. And we're going to be working with them this year to do automatic gating, so biometric gating. However, if we're giving our ID to the airlines to manage, that potentially means you have different experiences, different processes, and every airline has to invest in that technology. So we're really advocating strongly, and I warn Transport Canada, I would say this today, that we really want our Canadian government to sort of step up to the table and mirror what Europe is doing and what the US are doing.
Because these pilots and projects may not cover the whole passenger journey yet.
Correct.
But if you don't do them, you do nothing and you don't learn anything and you cannot deploy it. Because I think, for instance, Dusseldorf Airport, which is more a regional or Schengen airport, let's call it, lots of intra-Schengen flights. When do you make the decision to deploy biometrics on a smaller airport?
Yeah, interesting question. I was like, because we were looking at some ACI reports, right? And they were saying that over 40% already of airports use some kind of secure biometric token across multiple touch points, right? But to your point, these are isolated solutions, very much dedicated to an airline, to a single airport, right? So not going across. And that's really where our question from Dusseldorf came in as well. Which horse are we betting on, right? To make sure that it wins the race, especially when the reality for us, post the pandemic, we have not recovered our intercontinental flights yet. So our passengers more or less have one single touch point because they travel for most flights within the EU. And they don't really need to present credentials multiple times, right?
So that makes a very different way of deciding where to go. Of course, a lot of things are happening within the EU with the EU digital wallet. So let's hope that serves you well.
I think so, for sure. It's definitely something that we are looking forward to, and if I'm adding the sort of IT perspective on things, right? It all started with centralized identity, right, where everybody was doing for themselves, right, but with all the security concerns of having gun data in one place. Then came the federated identity, what we're all doing in the enterprises, right, with the SSO and multi-factor authentication, and biometric already stepped in there, right? You have solutions from Microsoft like Windows Hello that use your device with biometrics. And now really with decentralized identity, that's really like the wallet that you mentioned from the European Union, that hopefully that will come out really soon. That's really kind of a component that basically the person, the user itself, is then able to become an identity provider from the previous model and present his identity. And when biometric steps in, is like, how do I know you're who you say you are, right? And at that point, biometric steps in through the device completely locally and says, this person is indeed the one confirming and, allowed to open the wallet, give you any information that they choose to present, right? So, yeah.
Watch this space, as they say, to be continued, yeah. Maurice, in the US, there are some important developments with the mobile driver's license. The MDL, the mobile driver's license.
Yes.
Is Miami looking at using this, deploying that?
Well, for Within the U.S., the structure is a little different. So normally for international travel, you're leveraging your passport, right? So you need to have the ability to do that. So what we've leveraged with biometrics for us and our federal regulatory bodies, which is Customs and Border Protection, within the traveler verification system. So if we want to leverage something across the ecosystem, it needs to be that. The One ID system is basically your driver's license, creating this digital driver's license for your particular state. So from a level of applicability, if the state is not ready from an adoption perspective, it really doesn't do anything for you. To me, ideally, if it would be possible that everyone had a passport and we can connect that, I think it would be seamless in the US because each state's driver's license is different, how the data content is different, and so there's no uniformity across multiple platforms. It's just a verification of the face with content of that one-to-one verification, but it doesn't do anything else for you. And you cannot travel internationally with it. But we're doing some things with the Cat2 devices. I think EMEA provides them for travel, but it's primarily for domestic travel. But I think our long-term scope is that this whole globalization environment that we're in today is how do you address the cross-continent travel and where do the synergies sit in regards to identity. So to me, having a common biometric, tie that with a digital token to give you that seamless movement and flow, I think will be great. So for us, we're trying to have some conversations with our regulatory bodies. What can we come up with, right? We need to shift this paradigm of what we're doing today, because to me, long-term, I don't think it's truly sustainable.
You touch upon something I think is crucial and mentioned before, but I think we need to talk more about it, which is being in touch and having partnerships with governments, regulatory bodies, international standard-setting bodies, right. Whether it's industry bodies like IATA, ICAO, or your national government, or in the case of Europe, a regional like the EU. How important is that? And as an airline, can you make a difference there, do you think? And stand up for, I see Tara nodding, so that's good.
Well, I wonder about, we're talking about it from a context of biometrics and passenger, but of course, there's a safety piece, and airports are great at safety, right? It's our core mission. And when I think about how many different variable processes we have in airports for our own staff, our rake passes in Canada, our queues for everything, I think imagine if you had this biometric identity that at any point, not just at the security line, you could say, hey, look at that camera, or look at this, or look at that. Think of the safety improvement within an airport. And so to me, I think to get the regulators, to get everybody on board, and to show we all need the identity. So in Canada, yes, the airlines need it, but we need it too, right? I think maybe we need to approach it from a safety and efficiency. And I was listening to your new CEO, speed, right? It's not just flow, it's speed, right? But speed with safety. So just a thought, a solutioning thought, yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to add because there's two facets. One is from an adoption perspective, but the first part of your question, it raises a level of understanding of how well are we truly engaging. While the pandemic created a lot of disruption, and in our industry, we're taught how to deal with disruptions, right? But this really shifted the dynamic for us. But it did one thing more so than anything else. It gave us the opportunity to be able to engage with all of our partners, our regulatory partners, our law enforcement partners. Everybody came to the table. So the question of concern is, before we digress and go back to our neutral corners and close the doors, keep the doors open and let's continue to have this dialogue of coming up with innovative ways that we can change the processes by which we're currently dealing with today. And the doors are still open. Our goal and the intent is let's ensure that we don't close them. Continue the dialogue with whether it's Eurocontrol here or Customs and Border Protection, from whatever it is, everybody at the table, having a seat at the table, and how can we look at innovation? How can we look at tech? How can we look at workflow and continue to look at that dynamic? And it doesn't take tech to fix the process. It's looking at workflow. Are you open to change? And what we're seeing is we're keeping the door open. They're open to change, and we're having constant dialogue. Because remember back in the days, and anyone that can tell me it wasn't the case is us against them. who owned the passengers. That's an airline airport issue. But when you come into an airport, you're in the customs hall with the guys with guns, you can't tell them anything until they come out, right? So, but you have a seat at the table. So now let's look at how we can create and continue what we call the seamless travel, that seamless journey, because all of those touch points come into play.
And this means that once you do keep the door open and you do keep communicating, you maybe understand each other's issues and why there is an issue at an airport or at a government. Did you want to comment, Mihai?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point, and I think it all has to be centered also on the user very much, right? There are lots of governmental programs in certain countries there are now billions of people using biometric IDs, with or without more or less their consent. And I get your point regarding safety and who does the data belong to and so on. I think in this case we need to do it right, and it needs to be centric on the user, and it has to be their choice to look at that camera and say, yeah, I'm absolutely fine to run through this fully biometric process.
Yeah, Duncan,
Yeah.
how is that from a supplier perspective? How do you keep up with what your clients need and your clients with their partners?
It's interesting because I'm sat here thinking this is a really unusual situation whereby actually the answer is already available with technology and the problem sits somewhere else. Yeah. And I think what we've got to help the airports and the airlines work with is having a bag of use cases to start adopting the technology, both as organizations to get to understand and manage it and prove to regulators that it's feasible and possible and safe, whatever it needs to be, but also get the users accustomed to it. Because there's a theme here between domestic travel, international travel. There's that the demographic of travelers from an age and a wealth perspective. So we've got to be careful we don't create an environment where we're going super techie and then we isolate a type of user. So I like what Tara said around, and so we think of biometric and we're thinking of that ID tag. We're thinking of sort of the most critical level of data, which is that personal data. But there's a lot of biometric information that can be used to help the experience end to end. We touched on AI cameras, and so there's some things you can do just in terms of identifying passengers where no data is being kept. I guess it's a biometric kind of footprint to an extent. So I think we as a technology supplier, and you mentioned about partnerships and ecosystems, so some key pieces to us are things like the telco regulation. Can we have our private 5G bubble over an airport? So can we have that fabric to start enabling these things? And so we've got that covered as Ericsson. Yep. We work with all the telcos worldwide, and so that regulation for us is good. We then have the ecosystem. So when I said it's an unusual situation, normally people are saying, oh, wow, we could do this, we could do that. And it's like, the device isn't available yet. The connectivity isn't available yet. But actually, all the biometric things are available, the scanners, the cameras. So we're sort of ready. And I guess we've got to work together to sort of just start getting the proof points in play so that the airports and airlines can grow all together as an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Can I add, I want to play disruptor for a second.
No.
And any governments in here? All right. How many of you don't like government for whatever reason? Good job. So here's the question that I have from a biometrics perspective, and let's look at it from a regular business perspective. How many of you use Amazon Prime and all that great, wonderful stuff? All right. So my question to you is, as an airport, and I look at it from an airport perspective, we want your biometric to give you a safe journey end to end. But there are times in which I think you don't trust an airport. So you'll trust a supplier, so maybe we need to work through Duncan. But if you use Amazon Prime, online, throughout the free world right now, if I were able to hack Amazon, I have your credit card, I have your biometric, I have the name of your firstborn, I have everything I need to rob you blind. But I just want your biometric for one journey to give you an experience, and it goes away. How do I get you to adopt to that? Because you've already adopted to the most challenging part, and you have the most secure, and you're at risk. And we're giving you no risk. But there's an adoption issue that we have to contend and deal with. So seriously, think about that, and I really would like to look at the opportunity. How do we shift that dynamic?
Trust is always a key word in digitization. It is, and it has to do with understanding.
Right.
Passengers don't know where it sort of goes out there. Where is it, my data? And that not understanding of a very complex world of digitalization is just too much often. And then between the stakeholders who do share that data, there needs to be trust as well. It needs to be clear who gets what data, who is allowed to have what data. So that is, that's a complex issue, and that we will, I think, encounter for a while. Lennert, I wanted to ask you, because talking about governments and digitalization, we have the entry-exit system coming up at Schiphol. Sorry for that. And I know the Dutch government work very closely with the airport and with KLM as well. Do you find that beneficial? What is your experience?
Well, I think in general, if we look at this topic, then if you would ask a government, an airline, an airport, and you give them a blank page, I'm sure that they would never write down what we have today. Right? So the big challenge is, how do we take an iterative approach from where we are, from a brownfield, to get somewhere to a greenfield, right? And from a passenger perspective, I'm not sure if ACE would be on that blank page. But from a safety perspective, I totally understand it. Right? But if you then look at integration, the challenges, how to do it from an EU perspective, that's not an easy task. Right? So I really liked the news yesterday that they announced from an EU perspective that they will move forward with the digital identity. I think that's a big, big step, and we always talked about it, but it's never been in the news, and no one was able or willing maybe to say it out loud. So I think that's really a big game changer. And in the same time, we also know that technology wasn't the problem, but trust still is. So that step-by-step approach, I think if we, in hindsight, I wonder if an iterative approach is still the right thing to do, but I still think it's also the only way forward, because we are where we are. But getting those big steps where we see in other parts of the world where they started with a blank page, they do it better and faster. And I think from an EU perspective, we can learn, at least from an execution perspective. And that doesn't mean that we should follow them from a privacy perspective. And I think that's the real challenge we have with the different solutions here.
Because if we do look at it from a global scale, we have the issue of interoperability. You touched on that already, Maurice. So that's going to be a challenge. How can I use my digital identity when I land at Miami Airport, or if I depart from Miami Airport or Edmonton? So that is something we, I think, have to be.
And the airlines must be part of that journey, right? Because they will deliver quite a few credentials and identification details to other countries. Like when we are traveling to the US, we know that TNR is being sent towards the US government. And that is how it is. So we shouldn't hide for that, but we should be able to follow up on a process perspective, on a technology perspective, to make the life of our passengers a bit more at ease.
Yeah, let's stay on the topic of airlines, because without airlines, there's no need for an airport. You're married to airlines, I guess, in that respect. Let's put it that way. So what role do airlines play in your digitization strategy? Who wants to take it? Tara.
So again, Air Canada in Canada has been the sole pioneer. Now, with support from two airports, Vancouver and Toronto, but they were brave enough. And actually what was interesting is the airline with the airports asking for the approval to do things, that worked. When airlines would ask without the airport, but when we collaborate, it really works, right? I think there is a broader play, though, and I love the comment. I think you were asking Lennert about, how do we make sure the biometric data is passed to Miami when you connect or arrive. Again, back to sort of all of you as passengers, if you say, I want that information to be shared for this purpose, imagine the journey, right? And so I think there's also another piece around how do we engage the passenger. So sometimes I think as airports and airlines, we work together in our little ecosystem and we think because we're passengers, we know them all. But we don't actually engage with our direct passengers, which may be different by geography, by demographic, by what country we live in. So I also think getting passengers to really vote and say, yeah, we're tired of the lineups and we're tired of different processes at every checkpoint. I think that would be a harmonization effort, which could be valuable.
Yes. Harmonization, important word, yes.
So from Dusseldorf perspective, I think airlines, they have to be there. They're our customers, and we are in touch directly with them on the biometric data. Eurowings, part of Lufthansa, is our a home carrier, one of our home carriers. What it's always been the caution, and also looking the experience that our colleagues in Frankfurt had with the biometry, is we cannot really implement airline-specific solutions, right? We have to be careful when we look, it's again about the user-centric I was mentioning earlier. It's not, we can give you the seamless experience, but only with this app and only with this carrier. And I think that's something that, if we talk about the expectation, what do they expect? When they come to the airport, they expect that same level of experience regardless of their destination, regardless of the carrier. So yes, airlines are a very important part. They are a key player. It's not possible without them, but we also have to play together and not on specific isolated needs.
That's a challenge. Yeah.
It's a continual challenge because you realize several things. You're asking about airline-airport relationships, and you're trying to do that and establish that, but you can do that with your dominant carrier. If you go to your non-dominant carrier to try to work on that, then your dominant carrier say, well, why didn't you come to us first? Because we realize, while you want airline-to-airport relationships, you're not getting airline-to-airline relationships. So we're still stuck in the middle trying to work on and effectuating change. In a common use environment, you get to drive a lot of those initiatives. When you are in a proprietary use type environment, now it changes the dynamic. You're only as good as the gates or the concourses or the area by which that carrier controls, but you need flexibility. Now you've lost some of that. So if you work on a new technology initiative or you work on the biometric initiative, it's only going to be isolated to the infrastructure and the technology based upon that carrier alone. So now it goes back and it adds more credence to the old adage of if you've seen one airport, you've only seen one airport. Now you really only see one airport.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge. So Lennert's statement about being able to go Miami, Schiphol, and continue now goes away. We can't create that dynamic anymore.
Will we in the future, do you think?
We could.
How?
Well, we're charged. Everybody sitting at this up here, we're charged to be disruptors in some capacity. Our role is how do we go about being disruptors? That's the challenge.
I like how CIO stands for either Chief Information Officer or for Chief Innovation Officer. So I think information and innovation are intertwined and can be swapped, I guess. Is that true?
No. I have to add to that. Because as a former CIO, as a former Chief Information Officer, my focus and my directions are a little bit different. But not having the synergy between the Chief Innovation and CX, Customer Experience Officer, and the CIO, you're going to have a problem because you need synergies between the two. You can bifurcate the responsibilities, but synergistically, if you want to deliver on the end game and the end result of your organization, you're going to have a problem if you don't do that. I look at it from this whole holistic level of what's driving the customer experience, what are the business process improvements that need to come along with that. So if I were to take a lot of that, then I have to sit down and come up with a strategic initiative with Tara, with Lennert, and say, okay, this is what I'm seeing. What can we put together to go ahead and deliver on the good of the airport as well as our business partners? And it's not just the airline, it's the concessionaires, it's the cleaning company, it's everyone that touches the ecosystem of moving through your airport. So my charge is different, but you have a responsibility of tying the two together to deliver on the greater good.
Yeah.
I think it's maybe an internal struggle, right? Because on the one hand, you have to innovate. ITs always change. But on the other hand, as a CIO, you also have the role to control technical diversity, right? So you can't really start playing with all the nice toys out there because you have a responsibility towards your IT landscape and controlling that diversity. So yeah, it's an internal battle, I guess, every time to balance the two.
Yes, a balance. If we look at the market and what is out there, we already touched on, and I think you said it before, let's look at the problem first and then get a solution, and not get a solution and then a problem. Are the markets where you need them to be?
I think for the demand that we have nowadays, it's good enough. The question is how it will look in the future, right? So you see some companies stepping in, some other companies taking others, acquired other companies to really step in that area. Which is, I think, is good because we do need also the larger companies, not only the innovation side of it, to make it sustainable, to fit in the landscape. But I remain to say that I don't think technology will be our big challenge, right? So, and I think it's waiting for that game changer to really elevate the technology to the level that we all say, wow, now it works for me instead of I need to do A, B, and C.
Yeah.
But that's still quite far away.
Quite far away, yeah. Tara, what do you think?
There's a lot of technology. I worry about the algorithms for matching and who's governing that from an AI perspective. We know that some of those algorithms have inherent bias, so we have to make sure someone's looking at that. And I don't think airports, and I know I have a lot of vendors in the room, and they all don't like me already because I say things, Maurice knows. But vendors tend to want to sell to an airline or an airport. They're not creating ecosystem solutions. And so I'd really like to see them think about not this end-to-end monolithic solution, but maybe they create that algorithm checker that's validated against whatever, governance principles and the right certifications, rather than trying to say, okay, if you buy our platform and you go all in, you'll get this. I think the sustainability and the cost of the technologies being introduced, it's not financially sustainable. Okay. That's how we feel in Canada, and I work a lot with the other Canadian CIOs, and we talk a lot about how are we going to create economies of scale and drive down operating cost, because technology shouldn't be the same or close to the same price as infrastructure, right? It really should be more agile because the life cycle is much shorter, right? So anyway, that's my opinion.
Yes. Yeah. And let's get to the supplier last.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, right? Is the market ready? So I guess, to your point, you can't have one solution. In fact, to your prior point as well, there's not one answer to this, right? You've got to have this openness, this integration piece, and almost sort of a catalogue of services that the airline and the airport, or the airport can offer the airline, and then the airline needs to reciprocate back to the airport. Because if we bring it back to the fundamental point here, it's about the passenger journey. You can't have that handoff in the same way you can't have a handoff in technology. If an aircraft comes to the gate, it needs to be able to connect with the gate in a certain way and provide the information. You're not going to have every airport the same way, and every ground handler is not going to be the same. So as a supplier, we're working with trying to make sure that, yes, we're driving innovation, so new devices, whether it be a camera, an AGV, an automated wheelchair like we see here, putting that into the environment. But we've also got to address what I think, Lennert, you used the greenfield and brownfield kind of scenario. For me, that is about how we can help retrospectively connect things today better. So the things that we're not getting the data and information from, and I joked earlier about some people don't like me telling them we can get them more data because we've already touched on how data is a problem, but data is really important to that passenger journey. So we're working really hard to make sure we can retrospectively connect things. We talked about there's functions in an airport today which are components that have been there since the 1950s. It is possible to make them digital. Moving away from paper. Some of the easier things that we can do, but it doesn't have to be one standard for everywhere, but it needs to be an open standard. So if you've invested in something, you can redeploy it or get more benefit from it than you're already getting.
Yep. Open standards, crucial. I like what you said about sustainability. Those are important aspects. Maurice, do you see that with what the market's offering?
I think the market gives you an opportunity to be selective, to be able to scale when necessary. And I like what Duncan said and what Lennert alluded to is each airport is unique enough because you're dealing with different challenges. And at the same token, you realize that what's a major concern or issue for me may not be for everyone else at that point in time. Because when you're competing for resources, it's whoever screams the loudest wins, right? So if it's gate management and gate utilization, I'm not going to worry about retail. But if retail is saying that we're down 100 million euros, like we need to go make this money up, then I need to shift and say, hey, I got to talk to Duncan, and I need to work on innovation and technology that can give me better crowdsourcing in regards to movement, passenger flow. I need to figure out why individuals are not stopping in my concessions. I need AI and analytics. If people are waiting in line too long, send those triggers to make sure why am I losing revenue. So the challenge for me is what may be important at one point in time, it may not be a challenge for someone else, but I know for a fact that there's accessibility to data as well as applications and as well as the communication that exists between all of us, that I may be looking for something and say, well, we've tried, we've evaluated. The time to market for me now becomes a little bit quicker, whereas before it wasn't before. So the innovation and this charge is bringing more products to bear. It just gives me an opportunity to grab what's necessary at that point in time, depending on what the requirements or the needs are.
And that raises a really interesting point on that CIO, innovation versus information, is that, a lot of the CIO role is making sure things are working or investments that are being made are executed. The innovation side is really important. As a supplier, that's something we certainly at Ericsson, we take a bit of responsibility for because you've got so many stakeholders. So we could be focused on a particular problem in the airport, but retail might not be being addressed. So what we find is by coming to events like this, we meet a whole range of people with different challenges, and we end up as a bit of a matchmaker, a bit of a broker in the airport. So we're constantly giving advice. It's not just about buying a product, and it's sharing the information. So we got you guys are trialing some stuff in Miami, we're trialing some stuff here in Schiphol, and actually then helping network, beyond just events like this in terms of sharing that information. And that's the difference, right? You've got a really important job to keep it running. We can help with advising what is possible.
Yeah. And I think you are all members of ACI, so that's one of the networking places where you, I guess, know each other from and where you discuss these kinds of issues. Do you find that useful? Yeah.
Well, I used to chair the bid committee, so I have to say yes and yes again. From an ACI World perspective, any airport that's not part of ACI World, especially on the Business Information Technology Committee, you're doing yourself a disservice. With Lennert and Tyra and myself, there's about 20 airports that sit and we communicate on a regular basis, and we look at strategic initiatives globally. It's not confined to one region, so it allows us to be able to collaborate and engage and share information so we can make better empirical decisions as we move through our ecosystem. So it's fantastic for us.
I'm often not sure that the community is aware how much technology professionals do collaborate. Like, we all know each other, right, friend? And that's really great because you can call. You can say, hey, I hear you're doing this. How did it really work? How did it go? And we do that a lot, right? Yeah.
Yeah. In the end, it's all about relationships also as well.
Relationships are everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I thought you wanted to respond. Are there any questions from the audience?
Remember what I said?
You heard what Maurice said at the beginning. Nobody?
Yes, sir. All right.
I have a question. Sorry, I think I have to give you the microphone. No worries.
Dave Moore with Publicis Sapient. Thanks for the discussion. The question, I heard the word revenue for the first time in the 45 minutes in the speech. I think it was you,
I'm
Maurice.
a capitalist. I can't help it.
And the question I have is, from a contactless perspective, I understand the need to make the passenger experience better in your individual airports. But that aside, once you make that a better experience, what are you doing to improve revenue specifically?
All right, so now when you're looking at improving the revenue, is it airline improving the revenue via their app, or is it the airport opportunity to generate and increase ancillary revenue? Because revenue is a myriad. So
I agree. It's more of the latter on the ancillary side. Because looking at both yourself, Maurice, and you, Lennert, with your international travelers, folks who come in, everyone gets annoyed when the airline says, "Hey, you're about 30 minutes to land or 45 minutes to land. Hey, please sign up for our loyalty program." Why aren't they saying, please sign up for the Miami app and go get my clothing or something that I need to do for my 4-hour layover in Miami or Schiphol? Thank you.
Lennert has a great program, so I'll give you an update as to what I'm working on in my airport. So great question, and you're 100% correct. So from a loyalty perspective, we're starting with parking and seeing what we could do from the parking side of the house to enhance it. But when you're in the airport and you have that layover, you have that level of engagement, we're promoting how do we increase our revenue space? So we're doing it within our mobile app today, mobile food ordering, and so forth. But we want to change that dynamic just a little bit more because we came to realize one aspect that we are finding individuals don't want to tie into more apps. You know, this new generation of millennials and this next generation of AI are apped out. Right? So, and the funny thing is, I was talking to a group of primary schoolers the other day. I was giving them a tour of our innovation unit. And I said, if I had rolled out a new app to be able to do just that, would you download it? And they told me no. And they said, because I would have to delete something from my phone that I like to be able to download another app. They don't want to do it. These are primary schoolers. So you need to start listening to your dynamic and what your user base is going to look like moving forward. So what we're going is into this omni-channel chatbot type solution. So therefore, stepping away from the app, using this, whether it's WhatsApp, Messenger, where's the closest point? How can I order food? How can I engage and leverage that a little bit more? So we're trying to create this new dynamic, looking at the shift based upon what we're hearing. So looking at that to create that opportunity, we generated almost $600 million last year in concession revenue. All right? I don't know if I'm leaving money on the table. I don't know if I'm doing a great job. I just know what we've generated. It sounds great. But can we do better? We can always do better. So now for me, I'm looking at opportunities. How do we increase that level of engagement and look at our level of revenue spend? Because my goal and the intent is if we leverage all the technology properly, I could increase that golden hour. You know, that golden hour is that time period in which you just have that total euphoric period of where you want to spend, you want to engage. And I want to go ahead and how can I expand on that? And that'll add to my level of spend. That adds to my revenue. But do we have all the technology in place to even capture that and deliver on those expectations?
This is a great question. Yes. Anybody would like to respond? Yeah, another great question.
So it's a great, very good, great insight. Thank you. My question is this. Absolutely right. Everybody has got apps and you don't want another app. But let's think about the air side. On ACDM in particular, airlines and airports cooperate very well. Okay. Mm-hmm. And now, yesterday and today, look at it from airlines' perspective. Everybody is interested beyond seat revenue, like ancillary revenues, broaden the access. So airport is a great place where everything comes together. You have retail, you have a lot of services you can service. Imagine Miami Airport or Edmonton Airport. A lot of airlines are flying. So is there an opportunity for airlines and airports collaborate behind the scenes? It could be loyalty exchange program, remuneration exchange, it could be something else, so that it's a common, approach to customer, and then share the revenue.
My one-word answer is yes, and I would defer to my industry work wife.
So we are putting in a loyalty system as well, and we've actually engaged our key airlines in how do we share that information. It's important, but we're also looking at piloting this and then sharing it across Canada for airports.
Beautiful.
So, why should every airport have its own loyalty program? Why not? We'll trial it. We'll see if it works. We'll see. And then, hey, I can get my parking promos when I land somewhere else or when I connect through something. So we are looking at that. It takes relationships. So I think the biggest challenge, and we talked about this, it's who's willing to be brave, who's willing to give up control, and let's trial something and then scale it to that national or international level. So we'll see how it goes. It will be out there, Edmonton, and we are doing the multi-channel, omni-channel.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, so we'll let you know. And you can join with us.
Of course.
Yeah.
Follow me.
We'll have a different kind of marriage. Yeah.
Show me the money. One additional item, and I'm going to turn it over, is bear in mind, how many of you are frequent travelers in a particular airline? Okay, so you realize one thing. It used to be to earn your miles and to get your status was spend segments and flights, correct? Now I can take my branded credit card and get the same thing. Correct? So if that is the case, then we should be looking beyond that. What's going on between airports and airlines as an opportunity of looking at that branded aspect to look at the level of spend, looking at the revenue and that airport-airline relationship, because I've made status and I've only flown a handful, whereas I would have had to done like 15 flights. I've already made executive because of just my credit card pays for everything. So the dynamic has changed, so the airline is making as much money, if not more, and not having to worry about being 90+% load factor on that aircraft. So let's start shifting the dynamic. The industry is shifting, ladies and gentlemen. We need to be able to pivot and shift along with them. That was just my 2 cents. I'm sorry. You were going to say something.
No, I think my only point was just to echo what Tara was saying, right, about, I'm not sure if it's releasing control, but I think it's more sharing the data, right, because the passenger has made a booking, right, and the airline and the airport sometimes have different information about, and we need to cater for the moment this passenger leaves the door of the house, right, maybe even before that, to the parking, right, to whether he's going to choose a lounge, order something already that expects him at the lounge, to what he's having on the plane, right? The whole thing can actually be completely unified, regardless of which airline he's taking on, right? So it's more about being able to share the data to provide that seamless experience. And within that comes the whole biometry to be able to, wherever I walk, they're already expecting me. I don't need to show anything, right?
Well, and we had great success getting the airlines to share, because the more revenue, ancillary revenue we make, the less we have to charge the airlines. So it is an ecosystem, right? So they should want that to happen.
It's a great note to end on. It's all about the ecosystem in the end. Exactly. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you very much to Mihai, Maurice, Duncan, Tara, and Lennert for joining our panel. And please join me in giving them a warm round of applause.
Can I get a little louder clap? Wow. It's a hard crowd, isn't it? It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much for being here.